from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Tuesday night edition of the program. Our phone number, if you want to join our late night national town hall conversation, give us a call, 833-4825-337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And Trump was in Wisconsin. There was primaries in a few different places. Guess what? He won them all, even in New York. And so did Biden. So we're all but guaranteed to have that same matchup yet again. And speaking of Trump, there was some controversy on CNN yesterday when Trump's opponent on the independent ticket, RFK Jr., he said that Biden is more of a threat to democracy than Trump. Now, we're working on the invitation for RFK to come on the program. He's welcome to join us. I'm just not sure if we're reaching the right people. But I'd love to have him on to discuss this because I find it really interesting that he said that. But nonetheless, I want you to hear exactly what he said to Erin Burnett on CNN last night. Listen to this.
But do you really believe that when people talk about the threat to democracy that Trump poses, do you really think that is an equal evil to Biden?
I mean, listen, I can make the argument that President Biden is a much worse threat to democracy. And the reason for that is President Biden is the first candidate in history, the first president in history that has used the federal agencies to censor political speech, so to censor his opponent. I can say that because I just won a case in the Federal Court of Appeals and now before the Supreme Court. It shows that he started censoring not just me. 37 hours after he took the oath of office, he was censoring me. No president in the country has ever done that. The greatest threat to democracy is not somebody who questions election returns, but a president of the United States who used the power of his office to force the social media companies, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, to open a portal and give access to that portal to the FBI, to the CIA, to the IRS, to CISA, to NIH, to censor his political critics.
That's a slow clap from me to RFK. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. nailing it right there. I think we've all been saying this all along, but this is important that this is going out on the CNN airwaves. Thankfully, let me give credit to Erin Burnett for not saying, hold on, we're going to mute him. We're going to mute their microphone. We're not going to allow them to pollute our airwaves. You're not allowed to hear the way that, what's her name with the short hair? Rachel Maddow on MSNBC does, right? Because, man, this is the crux of everything. This is the main critique that the Trump campaign has for the Biden administration is just that they're attacking a political opponent. And he puts it out there so eloquently. And kudos to RFK Jr. as well. Wouldn't that be the ticket of the century, right? Trump running again after getting robbed in 2020 and coming back and running with a Democrat who's running as an independent who happens to be a Kennedy. That would be sick. But, it would really be probably the most balanced thing in the world. And not that I would support it. I don't agree with RFK Jr. I've shared with you that I used to listen to his radio show and, just to have material for my show. to know what the other side is thinking. He's a pretty hardcore lefty. But point is, the folks that work for Biden, and they don't all work in the White House, right? You've got KJP. She works in the White House press shop. But there are people within the media that are no doubt working for Biden. And one of them is Dana Bash. She claims to work for CNN, but she's really working for Joe Biden. And she quickly referenced the clip that I just played for you. RFK Jr. saying that Biden is more of a threat to democracy than Trump. To clarify, listen to this.
Now, let's just be very clear. This is an important fact check. Joe Biden wasn't setting out to censor Kennedy's speech or his political critics. His administration was encouraging social media sites to monitor and take down false information about the COVID-19 pandemic. There's no evidence that Biden himself was involved.
All right, Dana Bash, I gotta fact check you on this one. First of all, number one, nothing happens in any presidential administration without the president knowing. We all know that, right? That's why Trump is literally on trial for January 6th. He was nowhere near the Capitol, right? So that's number one. Number two, we have this discrepancy here where you say that there was no going after political opponents. Isn't Robert F. Kennedy running against Biden? And he didn't have to be a declared candidate to be a political opponent. If you politically disagree, right, if your policy, if your position on this issue is adversarial to Biden, if you think, like RFK Jr. does, that vaccines are the devil, then it seems to me you're at odds politically. Right? I think you would agree with that, Dana Bash. I wish you were here to talk to me. And guess what? That is a political opponent. And these policy differences, which the government was very clear on, they made it policy. They forced people out of the military. They forced employees out of companies. They forced companies to force their employees out. How are you going to say that this is not a political critic that's having his speech quashed? Come on. It's absolutely insane to think that it was anything else. That this was not false information about COVID-19, because the information turns out not to be false. And we find that out every day. Every day the CDC says, oh, and by the way, and the whole myocarditis heart thing. Yes. Oh, and by the way, and this, and that many people didn't actually die. Oh, and we should treat it just like the flu. Come on, Dana Bash. You're an educated person, and I know you're up to speed on the news. Things like this make you look silly, because you're not playing the game right here. You're not being fair. So that's what I've got to say on that front. You got some at CNN, like Aaron Burnett, who are asking the tough questions, and some at CNN, like Dana Bash, that are literally working for Biden. And it's a shame. But people see right through it, and those who don't see through it, listen to this show. We will see through it for you. And we will do the heavy lifting of watching this nonsense and cutting up the clips to make sure that you get it in context, right? We don't take little sound bites and try to pass it off as the entire scenario. I try to give you as many minutes or seconds as needed for you to understand everything. Multiple sentences, not little pieces, not 10 seconds, because it's important that you get the context of what's going on. And RFK Jr., he summed it up well. Anyway, I want to switch gears and talk about Biden's push for diversity, equity, and inclusion. The same way they made this push for the COVID vaccines, they're doing this. And they're doing it everywhere. It ends up in college campuses. It ends up in every job. It's all over the place. Now they're trying to push it into apprenticeships. And I want to discuss that with somebody that you guys probably remember. She's been a guest on this program before. She was the president of the World Wrestling Federation, then became the World Wrestling Entertainment, the WWE. Then she became the United States Small Business Administrator. Linda McMahon will be joining us in a little bit to talk about Biden's push for DEI and the effects that has on businesses and the country at large, in particular apprenticeships. So don't go anywhere. Keep it locked right here. Again, if you want to join the conversation via phone and it's on topic, we'll get to those probably around 10:45 and Eastern time. So about a half hour from now. 833-482-5337 is the number. 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
across America to the liberty-loving Latino, Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
What we saw last week was a poll that showed Biden making great strides and doing it on the strength of younger voters coming home. What we're seeing now is Biden making really good strides on the strength of independents coming home. And I saw Dan Pfeiffer, I think it was Dan Pfeiffer, saying the important thing about the State of the Union address wasn't that it was going to give Biden a quick bump. It's that it proved the Republican lie that he was some doddering old man, some doddering idiot. Just proved that to be a complete lie, that this is a guy that actually gave better than he got. And it's actually House Republicans and Donald Trump that are looking like, and
it's interesting because
idiot.
That, of course, is Joe Scarborough. You know him as the host of The Morning Joke on MSNBC. And Joe Scarborough, he had lots of things to say. He seemed like he was in slow motion in that clip. And basically says that he's not a doddering old man. This guy's a genius. Now, listen. He's not a doddering old man all the time. Most of the time. Half the time. Right? I mean, my dad was a doddering old man, too, who was once the bouncer in an illegal gambling spot in the back of a bodega in Brooklyn. The muscle, if you will. And in his late 70s, even at 80 for a short period of time, if on any given day, he would revert to being back who he was as a young man. And, he would throw a hook at you. And, he was a tough guy. So, I see Biden exactly the same way. My dad had days where he was like, it's 1974. Somebody go get the revolver. These are the things I would hear him say. And I'm thinking, wow, this guy's stuck in the past, right? Joe Biden, same way. He loses it every now and again. And that's when you see him do his go-to moves. Squint his eyes, flash those pearly whites, and try to dig his way out of things. That's when he starts whispering, come on, man. He'll, out of nowhere. It doesn't matter what the topic of conversation is. He'll say things like, in his whispering voice, it's about the single mom who's struggling to do homework with her kids. That's who we're fighting for, right? Because he knows that these types of platitudes, they have broad appeal. It doesn't matter what you're talking about. So you get stuck, you throw one of those out there. It's funny, really. It's comical. It's almost like doing radio, right? There's a lot of radio folks that have go-to things that they go into when they have to, they finish their topic, 10, 15 seconds early, and there's 15 seconds left on the clock. You got to have stuff prepared, ready to go to talk about those things. And I think that's what Biden does. It's muscle memory. So, yeah, he's a doddering old man, and he's also a corrupt career politician. And he reverts interchangeably to being both of those things. Now, Joe Scarborough, who, just like Dana Bash that we talked about before, he's also on the Biden payroll, it seems, where he's not working in the White House. He works at MSNBC as part of the Biden administration, as part of his PR team, as part of the press shop, if you will, for KJP. And he says, look, it's BS that Biden's a socialist. Listen to this.
And this BS, Joe Biden's a socialist. They love to say that. Joe Biden's really? Mm-hmm. Yeah, is that why you get richer by the second? Is that why you have more money than you know? Their problem tax season is, it really is. If they're investing in the stock market, it's not that he's a socialist and they've got to figure out how to hide money. It's that they're making too much money. Mm-hmm. And they got to figure out how to hide all the record profits they've made this year. Stock market at an all-time high. So that's on one side, right? This desperation to justify supporting a fascist because you think it may be good for your bottom line. Yeah. And then on the other side, you have the fact that Joe Biden is doing something, Gene, that nobody has done to Donald Trump in all of his years in politics. Mm-hmm. He's taken it to him every day. He's mocking and ridiculing him. Donald Trump can't even put up anymore that he cheated to win his club championship anymore without Biden making a fool of him. Everywhere he moves, Biden and his campaign are just tweaking him, mocking him. And suddenly this bully isn't looking so tough.
I listen, I think Joe Scarborough occasionally talks a good one. But I got to tell you, on this one, I don't see it. I don't see how Biden is making a mockery of Trump. Now, maybe I'm not watching enough of MSNBC. Maybe I'm not looking at the right polls. But I just don't see it. I don't see Biden cleaning Trump's clock just yet. Doesn't mean he can't do it later. I'm not a fool. I don't have my head buried in the sand. I realize that, we're 7 months away or something like that from Election Day, and a lot can happen, right? Polls can go up, polls can go down. Lots of things can happen, right? Distractions can occur. People can get their attention focused in other areas. But it seems to me that when he says, oh, you guys, the problem is they're getting richer by the second. Raise your hand if you're getting richer by the second. And if you're driving, only raise one hand, right? I mean, come on. You tell me who's getting richer by the second. Now, I'm not saying that we're in dire straits. I understand that there are some people that if they've got their money in the stock market, and we've had some good days in the stock market, that's a good thing. And yeah, maybe that will get Biden some support. Maybe. I don't see that being something that a ton of people are going to give him credit for. I think the fact that he's leaving, right, and is probably what's driving people to say, all right, we'll get the market back. This guy's out of here. But in reality, I just don't see it. Now, I know some people. I know some people have gotten some big raises at work. Not a lot of people, a few people, mainly those in healthcare. But I think by and large, most people I talk to aren't doing the Italy trip this year. They're doing the Florida trip this year, right? Not that Florida's a bad place. I think Florida's a great place. But people are spending less money because their money is worth less. When things are 35 or 40% higher than they were a year or three ago, what else can you do? It's not like you're making 35% more cash. That would just allow you to keep up with inflation, which Biden says is 3%, right? But in all actuality, that's just not the case. So what do we do? Right? What do we do? Do we sit here and pretend that the economy is just fantastic and that things are great while we see ESG being promoted, while we see DEI, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. This Marxist mantra just being pushed into corporate America, or the framework for the Chinese Communist Party and a social credit score system with ESG being pushed in, and we've had discussions how that stuff there's pushback against it. But these things greatly affect what we're doing, and I just don't see the win here. I don't see people going, oh, well, I'm doing The only people that can say, look, things are so much better for me. When I was in Venezuela, I had to rob 10 people a day to get to what I'm getting now, robbing just 2 people in Manhattan. So things are doing great. And when I get here, they give me a debit card. They give me, my own chartered flight to get to where I got to go. If not, I get a bus from Abbott straight to New York City. Mayor Adams, he begrudgingly gives me, a welcoming committee, and I get some more freebies over there. I get to stay at the New Yorker Hotel, blah, blah, yada, yada, yada. Right? Those are the people that are doing good. Will they all get to vote? I don't know. I hope not. But it's insane for me to think that that's where we're headed, right? That somehow everybody's getting richer by the second. Listen, if I'm missing this, give me a call, 833-482-5337, and let me know how I can get richer by the second, because that's something I'd like to do. Folks, we're going to continue our discussion. Like I said, Linda McMahon is joining us. We're going to talk about DEI, about business, about the economy, about 2024, and so much more. A little bit later, we got Nick Giordano scheduled to join us. Professor Nick Giordano. We're going to talk about some foreign policy with him and college campuses and more to come. I heard Ozempic might make you pregnant. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
Well, thank you, Rich, and thank you for everything. I know you very well, and I listen, but I have a lot of people that listen, and they love your show, and I appreciate it very much.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back, amigos, and we continue our discussion on this new proposal from the Biden administration, which threatens to burden apprenticeship programs with red tape, extra costs, more bureaucracy. And I want to talk about how that impacts the economy, in particular small businesses, right? Because when you push diversity, equity, and inclusion on any organization of any size, you're in effect pushing out meritocracy. And you're no longer focusing on what matters most, which should be the bottom line and your quality and hiring the best person to do the best job. But you're playing this political game that has its, its roots, or at least its motivation in Marxism. And it's a big problem. And I want to, discuss a big solution to this big problem with somebody who understands this all too well. Former United States SBA Administrator Linda McMahon. She is chairman of the board at the America First Policy Institute. Linda McMahon, welcome back.
Thank you so much, Rich. Thanks for having me tonight.
It's my pleasure. And when I heard about this and I saw this article that Biden has these new DEI mandates, I feel like it's a real problem for somebody that's in business for themselves. I used to be in business for myself, and I hated anything the government told me to do, including paying taxes. But I feel like you're way more successful when they're out of the picture.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'll tell you, it's not just the DEI mandates that are part of this new apprenticeship rule. This was a 2-page law that is now an 800-page regulation to put in place. And so, I think it was like several months ago that this rule, the new rule, was published, for public comment. And that public comment closed about a week ago. And during that time frame, there were 27 attorneys generals, 2 or 3 governors who wrote in and opposed it. We had secretaries of labor from different states, or the chief work officer from several states who wrote letters. I drafted a letter to the secretary of labor, and there were, 6 either secretaries of labor or workforce chiefs who co-signed that letter with me, protesting what this apprenticeship rule was supposed to be. I mean, the whole idea of an apprenticeship program is to train workers for the jobs that are needed, and so they can make a good living, and that our workforce gets filled out with the people who have the skills that are needed. We've got about 2.5 million jobs that we don't have a trained workforce for. So wow. The apprentice program, I think what the Biden administration is trying to do to it is just unbelievable. Let me just give you a couple of examples. Now,
sure.
Imagine if you were a small to medium-sized business and you want to train some apprentices to come in. Let's say you're a small manufacturing company. You're going to bring these apprentices in. You're going to train them, and basically, you figure for the skills, the jobs that you need, it's going to take maybe 6 months to train these apprentices. Or if they're very good at what they're doing, they may learn a little faster. Or if they're not quite as good, it may take them a little bit longer. So maybe 6 months. So during that time, they're being paid, a reasonable wage, et cetera, while they're learning. Well, under this new Biden rule, you must pay these apprentices the same thing that the skilled workforce is being paid. You must treat them as full-time employees, complete with benefits. You must have an apprentice program in place that trains them for 2,000 hours, regardless of how quickly they might learn this. And then you have to have 144 hours of classroom time.
Wow.
And if you are taking, federal money for this apprenticeship program, you must also, along with your apprenticeship program, submit to the government your DEI plan, which then means that you might have to provide transgender bathrooms. You might have to do all the other compliance things that come under the DEI rules. And so, in effect, you're probably putting these potential apprenticeship programs that could be so beneficial in training or upskilling workers who are already in place. You're just putting it out of the realm of possibility for small businesses. And so what happens? They don't train apprentices. We don't continue to add to the workforce. We have, an economy that is not really growing at the pace that it might be growing, and we still have all of these unfulfilled jobs. And so it's just incredible, what is actually happening under the Biden administration. If you contrast that to when I was in the Trump administration, and we put together an apprenticeship program. And we had, businesses from all over the country come to Washington, everywhere from Boeing to FedEx to, a lot of big businesses, small, medium-sized businesses. And the idea was that they pledged that they would train X number of new apprentices, over the next 5 years from that time when we were in office. And so that would have added about 16.5 million people to the workforce. So they made these pledges, to do that. And it was not without any of all of these, credible rules and regulations, to be in place. And so that kind of went by the wayside with a new administration, and now we have an apprenticeship program burdened with all these regulations. And it's just unfortunate. Above anything else, it's just unfortunate because we're not creating an atmosphere to train apprentices, either in new jobs or, as I said, upskilling in other jobs. And they're not being provided the skills that they need to earn a living, and businesses aren't being provided the workers that they needed. So it's just a double whammy.
Yeah, it sounds like it's designed to hurt, even though it's packaged in a way that seems like it's trying to help. And obviously, people want to like you said, they want to be able to one up in their career and upskill. They want to be able to get in foot in the door of something, becoming an apprentice to it. But at the same time, the employer needs to be able to have that transition period and not say, hey, look, I'm going to pay you whatever it is, $70 an hour, as if you're, a master plumber, let's just say, and you're not, right? And you're not able to conduct yourself as one. I see that as being a big problem. And when you couple that with things you just mentioned, being forced to engage in DEI regulations like bathrooms and whatnot, these things could make or break a company, in my opinion.
Well, they really could. A small to medium-sized business just can't afford these things, and so they just won't do them, and they're missing out on incredible opportunities, to grow their businesses and to have the skilled workforce that they need. And it's just a shame. And it's like, where in the world is the common sense anymore? We just don't seem to have enough common sense of just programs that could be beneficial in so many ways, and they just get destroyed by over-regulating. When President Trump issued his mandate, if you will, to all of the government agencies, for every new regulation you put in place, you have to get rid of 2 old ones, and it really wound up being 10 to 12. I think at some point even more than that were gotten rid of for every new regulation, so that we really reduce the regulatory burden on businesses across the country. And what happened? We had one of the most robust economies, in history, for the country. We were the leader of the world, and we're still the world's leading economy, but where we could be compared to where we are is just a shame.
Yeah, I agree with that. Folks, we're on with Linda McMahon. She's the chair of the board at America First Policy Institute. She was the United States Business Administrator. You might know her as former president of the WWE. Linda McMahon is a pro, and she understands business from all of those facets. We're going to continue this discussion because, to me, this seems like an election year ploy to get voters motivated in something that might benefit them, but not quite everybody that's involved. Linda McMahon, stick with us. Folks are coming right back. The number, if you want to join our conversation, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. The best guests, the best opinions. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, familia, welcome back. We continue our conversation with former Small Business Administrator Linda McMahon. She is the chair of the America First Policy Institute. And we're talking about this 800-page proposal to regulate apprenticeships. And clearly, you know, there's a lot of people weighing in on it saying, hold on a second, this doesn't sound good. They're sounding the alarm. Linda McMahon, to me, this seems like an election year ploy to just try and get a lot of either unskilled, low-skilled, seeking to be skilled workers to be on your side. Am I wrong?
Well, no, I think you're absolutely right. And, so if they just put up the normal headline, President Biden puts in place, apprentice programs for small and medium-sized businesses to fill the workforce void, jobs that are available, doesn't that sound good? So you really peel back, the layers of the onion and really get into the meat of it. And I'll tell you, and this is not the only thing that the Biden administration is doing. That's this anti-worker economy. I mean, other regulations that they are putting in place. They've made it harder for to be a freelancer or a gig worker, and that went into effect in March. So now you have to be more of an employee, and so you can't be an independent contractor or just a gig worker. And so you think about all of the different jobs, like say a freelance photographer. It's going to go out and get a job. So just limiting all of the abilities to do this kind of work. And the other thing that they tried to do was upend the franchise business model. And I remember when I was at SBA, we went to great lengths to put together a franchise directory, which literally spelled out everything that a business needed to do to qualify to be a franchisor. And it was very easy to go in and find that and to see if you had the qualifications. And so the Biden administration, the SBA administrator today, did away with that franchise directory. And so it was much more difficult to know if you qualified. And the other aspect of that was that franchise employees were now considered employees of the franchisor. So every Burger King store or McDonald's store that was a freely owned franchise, now those employees are supposed to be employees of McDonald's corporate, say, so just by example. And so taking away the incentive to be an entrepreneur or a small business owner. And, when the Biden administration is talking about we're creating all these jobs, well, the industries that are really growing, are government subsidized ones. Look at what's happening with all of the electrical vehicles sitting on as inventory on lots across automobile franchises across the country. They're government subsidized because they can't sell them. So it's just working against business and against the American worker. It's just a shame, and I can tell you that part of the burden that small to medium-sized businesses bear, and even bigger businesses too. This administration has added about $470 billion in costs over the last 3 years to businesses, and this is a mind blower. 291 million hours of paperwork to businesses over the past 3 years. Now, bigger businesses can have lawyers and accountants doing all this work, but small to medium-sized businesses can't. They just get buried under this paperwork. They go out of business, or their costs go up and they can't make profit, and just stifles the economy instead of, getting it to grow. So I think that, we just have to evaluate what we're doing to small businesses and give them a hand up. Don't keep burdening them with regulations that just are so unnecessary. I understand some regulations are absolutely necessary, but this overreach with regulations just stifles business. It's so frustrating.
We see that so much, not to mention this 800-page proposal for apprenticeships solely. But, I mean, we're just seeing how over-regulation destroys businesses in New York City. Right. I'm in New York City, and when I look around and I see so many vacancies on all of the big avenues, all I can think of, everybody wants to say COVID, but again, that was over-regulation of the government, telling people you can't come here, you can't eat here, you can't do this, you got to have a vax card, you got to have a mask. It pushed so many people out. Not to mention the tax burden that we have in New York State. It's an ugly situation for business in New York City, and it's looking very bare. in my opinion.
Yeah, it is looking bleak. That is for sure. But we just have to keep at it. But if you look at, the small business, index, the small business optimism index has shown just pessimism about the future,
right.
From small businesses for the last 25 straight months. And, the worst thing in the world for any entrepreneur or business is uncertainty. So, the Biden administration is allowing the Trump Tax Cut and Jobs Act to expire. And so some of the parts of that are already expiring, and small businesses that could write off acquisitions, capital acquisitions and expansions in the year in which they were done instead of having to amortize them, really was a boost to small businesses. And a portion of that has already expired, so they're starting now to have to write it off over 2 or 3 years, and so they're not investing like they were before. And not knowing if the tax cuts are going to expire, they're not going to invest in their businesses or try to grow and expand because it's just uncertain. It's just that uncertainty is just the worst thing in the world for business.
Linda McMahon, you are a gentlewoman, a scholar, and a patriot, and I want you to let everybody know how they can follow you and keep up to speed with the amazing work you're doing at America First.
Well, America First Policy.com is our website. We're a 501c3 organization, and it's interesting, when we founded it in just 3 years ago, in 2021, our purpose was not just to be a think tank, which we are. We create great policy. We do a lot of research. We have great scholars. We have 9 former cabinet members that chair our centers, but we are first and foremost a do tank. So please do follow us on AmericaFirstPolicy.com and see the good work that we're doing.
I love it. Not only a think tank, but a do tank. Linda McMahon, Madam Chairman, thank you for being here this evening. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
You bet. All right, folks, your calls and more coming up straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, and to the phones we go as promised here in the 10 o'clock hour in New York City. I'm with you live till 1 a.m. The phone number, 833-482-5337. Let's go to Mike in Cleveland, Ohio, WNIR. Mike, go right ahead.
Because of the corrupt government we've had since probably 1945, right after World War II. That's why there's these regulations, because of the lobbyists lobbying and paying off government officials. Who are they trying to kid? It's very simple to understand. That's why these small businesses can't make it here in this country. This country sold out our manufacturers to China, to Mexico, because of the corrupt leadership.
Yeah, I no argument from me, Mike. I agree with you 100%. I think that we've had certain trade policies over the years, NAFTA being one of them back in 1993 that I can remember. And again, you're citing 1940. Probably right on with that. I think there's been a number of policies we've put in place with respect to trade that have hurt us. And what we need are America First policies, not by brand, like, Trump per se, but literally policies that keep America first while maintaining our global positioning, because it's a complicated rat race. Thanks for the call, Mike. I appreciate it. Big shout out to everybody in Ohio on WNIR. Folks, don't go anywhere. It's Rich Valdez. We're coming back hour number 2, and the conversation continues. I'll be right back.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Tuesday night edition of the program, hour number 2. Our phone number, if you want to join our late night national conversation, give us a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. And there's a bunch of things going on in the news today. Of course, there's the strikes, right? They're preparing for strikes in Gaza. This is a big deal. There's fears of World War III, of course, circulating. We've been hearing that, I don't know, since 2015, right? No matter what happens, it's going to be World War III. It seems to be the new thing. It's like the boy that cried wolf. Iran is threatening revenge over the assassination of their general, and just there's a bunch going on there. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. We also have, let's see, there's another story here I wanted to mention real quick. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken has announced the appointment of a new DEI chief, diversity, equity, and inclusion. We saw how that is being pushed on small businesses through apprenticeship programs. Now we're seeing how it's being pushed in diplomacy. And we're going to see shortly how it's being pushed on college campuses. DEI is all over the place. And let me tell you, I don't think it's lending itself well to the success or the future of our country. Anyway, the Biden administration has been scrambling to tell Iran it wasn't involved in Israel's strike against the Iranian generals at the was that embassy or whatever it was, a consulate. And I want you to hear, not Blinken, but the other one. His name is John Kirby at the White House press briefing today. He says, we're outraged about the IDF strike that killed the workers in Gaza. Listen to this.
We were outraged to learn of an IDF strike that killed a number of civilian humanitarian workers yesterday from the World Central Kitchen, which has been relentless in working to get food to those who are hungry in Gaza and, quite frankly, around the world. We send our deepest condolences to their families and loved ones. We've seen the comments from Prime Minister Netanyahu and from the Israeli Defense Forces about their commitment to conduct an investigation. As we understand it, a preliminary investigation has been completed today and presented to the Army Chief of Staff, and we'll obviously look to see what they discover in this preliminary one. But we expect a broader investigation to be conducted and to be done so in a swift and comprehensive manner. We hope that those findings will be made public and that there is appropriate accountability held.
Now, Anthony Blinken echoed that stuff, and he was saying the same exact stuff, saying that, you know what, it's not enough. We have to make sure that we meet the needs of the women and children in Gaza who remain caught in this horrific crossfire of Hamas's making. So in Blinken's conversations with the Israeli government, including just last week when the defense minister was in Washington, and just yesterday, they were on a video call with their Israeli counterparts, and again, impressed upon them again how imperative and how important it was maintaining the level of assistance that they have of aid getting into Gaza. So everybody in Washington is outraged today, and over the murder of the general, and of course any civilian casualties. Nobody's ever looking for that stuff. And Blinken gave some comments on that are kind of long, so I'm not going to play them for you. But that's the current state of affairs on what's going on with foreign policy. And I want to dip into this really quick before we continue our conversation on DEI with our guest, Professor Nick Giordano. He is from the Community College in Long Island, and he's also the host of the PAS Report. Nick Giordano, welcome back.
Always a pleasure to be on, Rich.
Thank you, brother. So you're hearing this stuff, and tell me, what's your take on this stuff? Obviously, I think it's a win for the Israelis to have gotten this general, but it seems like they're taking an L here because of civilian casualties. What say you?
Well, I think it's remarkable where the Middle East is today. If we think back to 2017, January of 2021, it was the most remarkable period of stability in the Middle East, certainly in our lifetimes, but perhaps in a long time in history for the last 100 years or so. Today, we see the Middle East has devolved into chaos once again. And a lot of it is being fueled by the lack of leadership from here in the United States. The fact that America would abandon one of its allies after they killed an Iranian general and then go so hardcore after Israel because there was collateral damage. I mean, we all feel for the innocent lives that are lost in any conflict, but it really shows you how our foreign policy has shifted dramatically in the United States. And when you look at this administration, it was just, 2 or 3 months ago that we had 2 or 3 service members killed by Iranian proxy groups. And this administration promised retribution, promised to punish those that were responsible and punish Iran because Iran is the one that's funding and arming these groups. And now we're trying to beg Iran not to do anything to us because Israel decided to kill one of its top generals. It really is a remarkable period in American history and world history. And the world is so unstable right now that it's a powder keg. And the slightest spark could set something much bigger off, create a much larger regional war that we get drawn into. And I'm not too comfortable with the commander-in-chief, President Biden, sitting at the helm as commander-in-chief. That makes me a little nervous. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, Nick Giordano, it's an interesting point you bring up because as you were saying all that, it just in my head I'm hearing Trump getting nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize for the Abraham Accords, and I know there was a lot of critique of the Abraham Accords. Oh, it didn't include the Palestinians. It was this, it was that, but the reality was none of this was happening. Right? We were in way better shape. And again, yes, it's a testament to Trump, but it's also just a testament to sound policy. I think when you don't do what Biden's doing, which is kind of like doing so much nothing that you're antagonizing, right? There's so many people out there that make this case for we have to have foreign policy that is basically minding our own business. We got to stay out of everything. I think that's exactly what Biden's done. He stays out of it so long, and then things get out of hand, and then he chimes in with things that are insignificant, like allowing his colleagues, his counterparts, and whatever, Schumer and et al. to say things like and echo his own statements that we need a new leader in Israel, right? Things that really destabilize the appearance of our partnership there, and I look at all of it, and I think. All of it's just unnecessary.
Well, it appears that President Biden is trying to play all sides in all these different conflicts. I mean, just remember when he said, well, if Russia does a small incursion into Ukraine, well, maybe that might not be such a big deal. But if it's a large incursion, he's going to face the wrath. And same thing with Israel. At first, he said, yes, Israel has the right to protect itself. Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered. It was a massacre. And, Biden gave him the green light. Now he's saying, pull back. He's criticizing Israel both publicly and behind the scenes. And it's really interesting how it's changed. It used to be that in public, you'd have the United States and a lot of Arab countries criticize Israel in public for certain actions. Take the Ozempic nuclear facility in Iraq in 1981 when Israel blew it up. We all came out and criticized it because the United States was arming Saddam Hussein in their war, Iran-Iraq war. But behind the scenes, we all cheered Israel on. They had the support. And the same thing is supposed to hold true in this conflict. We may criticize Israel to some degree publicly, but we support them fully behind the scenes. Not this administration. This administration has completely abandoned Israel. And it's going harder on Israel than it is on America's adversary, which is Iran, which they are the ones that are responsible for a lot of this chaos in the Middle East. They're also responsible for more American service members' death than al-Qaeda ever was. And so they should be putting sanctions on Iran right now. They should put the fear in Iran that, hey, if you even think about attacking any of American interests, you will face the wrath of the United States military. Instead, you have the Secretary of State contacting Iranian officials saying, no, we want to make it clear that we had no involvement. We didn't give them any intelligence. And so leave us out of it. If you have a problem, take it up with Israel yourself. I've never seen that through, the last several administrations. I've never seen anything like this. Mm-hmm. It's insane. And it's leading to more instability in the world.
It's sad is what it is. Really is sad. Folks, we're on with Professor Nick Giordano, Nassau Community College out on Long Island. And we're coming right back with him. Don't move a muscle.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
There's more news in your commentary, in your analysis, than there is on the news network.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
So, Glenn, Donald Trump will violate this gag order in 3, 2, 1. I mean, so when that happens, what happens? I mean, because Mary points out that you don't have, the defendant sort of signing, saying, okay, yeah, I acknowledge all this and this can happen to me. How do you see this playing out when that happens? Because you know it will.
Financial fines. And of course, who cares, right? There were some minor financial fines put in place by Judge Engoron in the civil case when he violated the gag order. I agree with Mary. I mean, in theory, you can be held in contempt. You can be confined for a brief period of time. But I go back to the fundamentals of the law. The law ordinarily says when you're a defendant on pretrial release, particularly in serious felony cases, and Donald Trump has 4 serious felony cases, if there's clear and convincing evidence that you pose a danger to the community or even one person in the community, you can be detained pending trial to neutralize that threat.
Okay, so that's Glenn Kirshner. He's a legal analyst at MSNBC, and I don't doubt everything that he just said, that if you are a clear and convincing danger to the community, you will be neutralized as a threat. My question is, who is Donald Trump a threat to, Nick Giordano?
He's a threat to the bureaucracy, to the swamp. I mean, that's what he's a threat to, and that's why you're seeing this all-out assault on him. This idea of a gag order on Trump is completely ridiculous. Now, if we were talking about a judge's daughter that just put out a couple of tweets that they didn't like Trump, that's one thing. I could say, well, the judge has integrity. They're trained to put aside their personal beliefs and their ideology, and he's not his daughter, so it's not that big of a deal. But this is a different situation. The daughter is operating a major fundraising outfit for the Democrats. Not only is she operating a major fundraising outfit, she's using Trump going to prison to raise the money. And that's a really big deal. So she could use Trump going to prison to raise money for Democrats to run for office, but he can't call that out. He's not allowed to highlight that. And this is a problem with gag orders. In this country, you're innocent until proven guilty, and you should be able to call out injustices as you see them. There is a concept of free speech as well. And so he should be able to bring attention that the judge's daughter is making money for other Democrats off this case. And yes, this judge should have to recuse himself. There shouldn't be a gag order in this. Now, I don't like it when people go after other people's children. That shouldn't happen. But this is an adult that is running Democrat fundraising operations, and it should be highlighted. He should not be in charge of this trial, because how can he keep the impartiality when his daughter is raising money off this?
Right. And again, I don't know if it plays much of a role, but I saw that his wife also worked for Tish James as a deputy AG or something like that somewhat recently. And, of course, she's bringing this case. So it seems to me that there is a conflict of interest for Judge Juan Merchan. And nobody seems to care. Instead, they're just telling Trump, shut up, and you can't call it out. And I think that's incredibly unfair, not because it's Trump, but because if it were you or me or anybody else, I think you just got to call, fair, and wrong. And this one is definitely both not fair and it's definitely wrong. Now, Nick Giordano,
but you know what the stupidity is? It feeds in to Trump's argument that the system's targeting him, that they're weaponizing our justice system against him. That's the stupidity, that they don't even realize that it's the self-fulfilling prophecy. It's actually true, and they're showing every day how it's true, and they don't see that when that happens, his poll numbers go up. So Democrats should actually reevaluate this whole strategy they're using because it's not working for them.
Yeah, excellent point. Now, you've got this amazing piece that you've written where you talk about the new 2025 budget proposal from the Biden administration and how it increases funding in education for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Tell us about it.
Well, so this is the campus reform piece, and everyone should go to campusreform.org to check it out. So we have student proficiency levels at all-time lows. We have chronic absenteeism among students at all-time highs throughout the entire country, behavioral issues in classrooms. We have a teacher shortage. But don't worry, President Biden's going to save the education system by doubling the DEI money it spends within the education system. It is absolute insanity. Our students aren't learning anything, but they want to train them to be good political activists for when they get older. And this is just another example of how this administration does not understand how to run schools, how to run education, how to run government, how to do anything pretty much competently. Rather than tackle the real issues within education, the fact that students aren't learning, that proficiency levels are at all-time lows. Students know nothing about American history or civics. They have no idea how the government operates. Rather than get students able to read and write, they're saying we're going to double down on diversity, equity, inclusion, which has been proven to be a failure. There is not a single study that exists that shows that diversity, equity, inclusion in the education system can improve in proficiency levels. Not a single study says that it helps with reading, writing, or mathematics. And yet they keep on going for it. And when you question them, when you corner them about it, well, then you're just racist. Then you hate minorities. You don't like brown people. You're an oppressor. And to me, what's happening to the youth is absolutely tragic because these students are not getting an education they deserve. And the scary part is they will be the future leaders someday.
I agree with you 100%. And it blows me away because this whole idea of DEI, I think, causes an ugly divide, right? And something you point out in your piece, that DEI is a toxic ideology that fosters division and fuels cultural rot. And that couldn't have been said any better, right? I think that's 100% true. So, folks, please go to campusreform.org to check out the piece. We can't do it justice in the time that we have, but definitely take a look at it. Now, Nick Giordano, I know you're always out and about and doing big TV shows and speaking across the country. What's on the agenda for you?
No, well, I just had Victor Davis Hanson on my podcast, so everyone can check out the PAS Report podcast. Mm-hmm. I'll be on Gutfeld on April 16th. And we're holding a education leadership summit down in Nashville, Tennessee with the Leadership Institute. So it'll be a great event.
Outstanding. Well, folks, Nick Giordano, follow him at PAS Report on all the social media. Nick Giordano, you are a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot, and I thank you for staying up late with us, sir.
Always.
You bet. All right, folks, we're coming right back. We're going to talk about Ozempic. Can it make you pregnant? Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
He's brown, he's bald, and he's breaking it down. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. And I want to get into this topic about Ozempic. That is the very popular diabetes management injection that has a side effect of losing weight. And a lot of people are proliferating it to use it solely for weight loss. And, there's always a story. Every week there's a new Ozempic this, Ozempic that. And I love to talk about them because I think they're just really interesting. But there's been a new unintended side effect or unexpected side effect, I should say. And I want you to hear it in this Fox 13 report.
For years, medications like Ozempic have been known to treat diabetes, with weight loss being a side effect. Recent versions of the injections, like Wegovy, were FDA approved for people struggling with obesity.
Helps people quite a lot in their journey in changing diet and losing weight. So I do prescribe it very frequently.
Kim Van Gross is a nurse practitioner at Overlake Medical Center in Bellevue, working in the treatment of obesity for 16 years. She says while working at the Overlake Bariatric and Medical Health Clinic, weight loss medications of the past weren't quite as successful for her patients until drugs like Ozempic hit the market.
And then also see it kind of get into the mainstream and become this sort of social movement has been quite shocking to me because I've never experienced this before. But I've also never had such a powerful tool.
A powerful tool now showing unexpected results. Pregnancy, the weight loss drug and its impacts on fertility for women, trending on TikTok and social media.
People who struggled with fertility issues are quite surprised by this because they thought that it was something unrelated or something not fixable.
So the question to me is, the big question is, if women are getting pregnant from their use of Ozempic, I think what I would like to know is it the actual semaglutide, the drug that promotes fertility, or is it the fact that they've lost some weight that's making them more fertile? To get the answer to that, and of course, any questions you might have, the phone number is 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. I want to welcome Dr. Courtney Gowin. She is an author and the founder of the NEST Prenatal Pediatric Center, and she's our guest. Dr. Courtney Gowin, welcome.
Hi, it's so good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So let's chat a little bit about this because I find it interesting. There's always, something, this latest story about Ozempic babies. That's a new trend that's out there. What can you tell us?
I know it is really interesting, and I think it's really bringing to light to regulating women's normal physiology. So I definitely welcome the conversation. There's definitely a lot that we can dive into with the Ozempic drugs, and it's a diabetes medication, and so women, they are losing weight on it, but diabetes medications are meant for diabetes. There is the side effect of losing weight, but anything like this that has such a rise and becomes gains a lot of traction on social media, you have to be careful because there are some potential side effects. If women do become pregnant and they stay on Ozempic, it does have a black box warning label for pregnancy. So that is something to keep in mind, that this is not a fertility drug. It's more bringing to the conversation that we're regulating physiology and we're regulating hormones by stabilizing blood sugars and healing the metabolism. So that's definitely something that is gaining traction. And whenever we heal the metabolism, women's menstrual cycles and therefore ovulation start to improve and regulate, therefore increasing fertility.
Wow. Fascinating. Now, is this something, I guess you said it's a warning that's on there now, but was this known before? Because I hadn't heard about this one before.
Yeah, this is definitely a new, I guess, trend, but yeah. I think it's known for years, and we do a lot of work with natural infertility for our patients. And the number one thing that we always work on is regulating blood sugar, hormones, and weight loss. And all these things, whenever you're going through just normal or natural IVF treatments, weight loss, regulating hormones, blood sugar is a big factor in conception and not only getting pregnant, but sustaining a pregnancy. So I think that the physiology has always been there, but these conversations are definitely bringing to light kind of like the terrain our women live in these days with high stress jobs, high cortisol levels, food that's readily available on the go that's really just trashing our hormones, so to speak.
Now, is everything you just mentioned, high cortisol levels, trashy food, is this something that is specific to women, or are you just citing that because pregnancy is specific to women?
I'm just saying that pregnancy is specific to women.
Right. So those same things would affect men who
yes,
dealing with stress and everything. Got it. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, because that was part of my thinking was that and I guess I'll ask, if you have a couple that is struggling with fertility issues, do you expect to see an increase in off-label prescriptions of Ozempic to help them conceive?
I hope not. Honestly, I think that maybe we need to realize that this is bringing to light, hey, we need to start looking at some other things in the more natural system to help couples conceive by regulating their metabolism and healing their metabolism. I definitely love bringing the conversation to men because men are half of the equation. Sure. And I always tell my patients, I say, hey, did you know that a lot of your morning sickness is caused by the sperm health and the placenta health is caused by the sperm. So I say if a woman is having morning sickness, a lot of that is caused by the sperm health in the men. So they always look side-eye to their husbands like, I told you to start eating healthy. So it's definitely whenever we're working towards fertility within couples, we definitely want men to start and jumping on that health train as well. And that brings in a lot of mental, emotional support too.
Well, this is something I'd never heard about, so this is pretty cool. Let's talk about that a little bit. So, Dr. Courtney Gowin, again, I want to get a really good grasp of this. If women have morning sickness, that you're saying that men can play a role, what is it that men can do, or what should they be doing in order to help their wives to not have morning sickness?
So, whenever you look at the natural life cycle of an egg, it's about 3 months before of a woman's health. And then when you look at a natural life cycle of a sperm, it's about 30 to 60 days and kind of in the cycle. So I say, hey, couples, whenever you are starting to conceive, women and men, women definitely more for it before, and then men, when they kind of jump on the train, things that they can be doing is cutting out alcohol. Don't hate me, don't throw anything at me. Alcohol can be definitely a big hormone dysregulator. Processed foods, look to the diet, eating things, leafy greens, supplementing a natural form of folate, things like that men can be doing as well to increase their sperm motility and viability whenever it goes to having a healthy pregnancy for the mother and decreasing morning sickness symptoms.
Wow. Fascinating stuff. I had not heard that, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners hadn't heard it either. Folks, we're on with Dr. Courtney Gowin. She's an author and the founder of NEST Prenatal Pediatric Center, her website, nestmotherhood.com. And she's got an upcoming book called Mother that's coming out. We're going to learn a little bit about that straight ahead, and we're going to continue our conversation on all of this interesting stuff about Ozempic babies. It's a trending topic not only on social media, but in the news as well. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
I want to listen to you, Rich, all the time.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. We continue our conversation on Ozempic and one of the newest side effects that's not just weight loss, right? But actually people getting pregnant, which has brought to light that there are a lot of interesting factors that go along with that. We're having that discussion with our guest, Dr. Courtney Gowin. She's an author and the founder of the NEST Prenatal Pediatric Center, and she's got an upcoming book called Mother. The website, again, is nestmotherhood.com. Now, Dr. Gowin, tell us a little bit about your experience, I guess, with prescribing Ozempic. Is this something that you do frequently or infrequently?
So I operate a lot in the natural fertility world. So we don't prescribe. We do a lot in our wellness center with homeopathy, nutrition, acupuncture, chiropractic, physical therapy on the natural end. But we do work really closely hand in hand with OBGYNs, a lot of IVF doctors and stuff like that. So we have seen it prescribed for weight loss in our industry. Dallas is a big industry for birth and weight loss. So we definitely have seen it. But me personally, I definitely work in the realm of more of the natural lifestyle.
And when we look at those types of lifestyle changes, what are some of the things, and again, you mentioned leafy greens and changing diet, but I've heard about the use of peptides and other types of supplements. What's your thought on those things?
I definitely think they have a time and a place. Everybody's physiology is very different. Everybody's terrain of their metabolism. We've all had our different set of experiences from mental, emotional, physical. So there is a time and place for those things. But I do think that whenever we really start to take a hard look at the metabolism and regulating blood sugar and blood glucose and how it interacts with the hormones and regulating our menstrual cycles, ovulation, sperm health, which we kind of talked on, I think if we start to open those conversations more and we start to look at the seed oils in our food and the chronic stress that we're experiencing and caffeine addictions and things like that, then I think we have a really good conversation here to start conceiving more naturally and also having people increase their longevity.
Talk to us about this caffeine addiction, because I think, for many people, that's a way of life.
Yeah, I mean, you got me on that one. Yeah. I'm a single mother of 3 and a doctor, and I own a couple companies, and I definitely am caffeine addicted, and I will attest to it. But there are some different things. I even came out with my own brand of mushroom coffee and different adaptogenics that I'm transitioning off of. But it definitely is. It definitely affects you if you've ever tried to step away from caffeine. There's definitely a detox period where you do have the headaches and things like that. But I will say in my patients' pregnancies, even 2 cups of coffee within the first trimester increases the rate of miscarriage. So I always say just be very mindful. Yes, be very mindful in your preconception period. Starting to slowly wean off that caffeine. And then once you are pregnant, be very mindful in that first trimester because it has been shown and studied to increase chances of miscarriage. So I always like to remind my patients of that.
Wow. Good to know. No coffee if you're planning a family. Now let's switch gears a little bit to your upcoming book. Tell us about the book. Why should people buy it?
Well, we see about 1,200 patients a month in our wellness center in Dallas, and I've been in private practice for 10 years, and it's been so fun. I was thinking the other day, I was like, what were other 25-year-olds doing? I was like building this maternal wellness center, but I kept getting question after question from preconception, pregnancy, postpartum, and I just kind of like put all of those questions into a conversation, and I wanted to create a reference book. So it just kept going and piling up research and things like that. So it's a really beautiful read, and it's also meant to be earmarked on your nightstand where you can just kind of go and say, okay, what are some natural remedies for preeclampsia? What can I do in my postpartum period if I'm feeling overwhelmed? What about my mental health? What about these things that can help sperm health? Things like that aren't usually mainstream talked about. I dove into the research and it took me about 2 years and wrote it. And then AI came out. I was like, oh my gosh, I could have finished that so much faster. But it definitely was a lot of healing in writing that book too.
Outstanding.
So I think fabulous.
Yeah, I think the process from a lot of authors I hear is that it's very cathartic, and then it's great to share that because it's that way for other people as well. Folks, again, our guest, Dr. Courtney Gowin. She is the owner and the founder of NEST Prenatal Pediatric Center, and the website for that, nestmotherhood.com. Dr. Gowin, let everybody know how they can find you, where they can follow you, and how they get a copy of the book.
You can always reach out via Instagram, Dr. Courtney Gowin, Gowin. And then nestmotherhood.com. You can always drop your email, and then we're getting ready to start pre-selling So you can just jump on the wait list and you'll get all of our tips and tricks for natural pregnancy and conception and postpartum.
Outstanding. Well, it sounds like you are well on your way to having a runaway bestseller. I want to thank you for being with us this evening. Really, 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 really interesting. I learned a lot of things, and good thing I'm not having any more kids because I love coffee.
Me too.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Absolutely. Good night.
You bet. All right, folks, we come back with your calls and more. Remember, Open Phone America is coming up right now. You get your calls in 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. And we continue our discussions. And I want to lay out a few things for you. One, I want to remind you that if you're listening to the show live on the radio, fantastic. Make sure that you have a backup way of listening to the show. Why? Well, because sometimes there are programming changes at some of our local stations where you may not be able to hear the show one night, maybe many nights. You never know. So always have richvaldez.com as a backup. You can always go there and click the Listen Live button, and you'll hear the live show. If we're not live, when you click the button, you'll hear the latest version of the live show, which is great. And you'll have the chance to download or stream right from the website any of our latest shows. They go back to like the beginning of time. And you can also subscribe to the podcast, and that's very important, and it helps the show out a lot, too, if you subscribe. This way, every time there's a new episode, like we end at 1 a.m. every day, around, 1:30, 2 a.m., the episode is uploaded, and you can hear it, share it, save it to your phone, do whatever you got to do, and you'll get a little notification if you're subscribed to the podcast. So I always recommend that you do that, especially if there's an interview that you liked or that you want to revisit and re-listen to what the guest had to say. I know a lot of our listeners, shoot me notes on social media telling me that they did that because they like to, really get involved with the long-form interviews that we do. So that was a quick note on that. And like I said, sometimes the radio isn't available. And you always want to have a backup plan. We also have every show uploaded to YouTube, by the way. This is something I only recently learned, something that the wonderful Westwood One Network and the Cumulus Podcast Network do for the show. And you can go to youtube.com and look for Rich Valdez, America at Night, and listen to the show right through YouTube. You don't get to see, you'll see a picture of my face, but you don't get to see a live stream of the show, at least not yet. But that capability will be coming eventually. But they're all there as well, and you could take a look at the shows on YouTube as well. Now, some of the things I want to talk about in Open Phone America, everything we talked about tonight. We talked about the unfair deal that Trump is getting with respect to this case with Judge Mershon and his wife that worked for Tish James and his daughter who has worked for Biden and Kamala Harris and Chuck Schumer. All people that are somewhat tangentially involved and raising money on the fact that Trump will go to jail when her dad is the judge that's overseeing the case. Sounds like a conflict of interest to me. We've also talked about DEI and how that's detrimental to businesses and everything else from colleges to your kids. And can Ozempic make you pregnant? Anyway, folks, there's a lot to discuss. I got a lot of other headlines to share with you. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
From the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the third hour of the program. Of course, it's our Tuesday night edition of the program, and if you want to join our late night national town hall conversation, give us a call, 833-4825-337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And this third hour we like to call Open Phone America. Of course, we want to talk to everybody. If you're on the West Coast, in Oregon, in Washington State, in California, give us a call. If you're on the East Coast, in New York, or anywhere, on the East Coast, and of course, everywhere in between, looking forward to chatting with everybody tonight. 833-482-5337. And there's a bunch of interesting stories out here that I want to share with you and, of course, get your opinions on. One of the things that we're going to talk about is this comment from Trump. He's out on the trail doing two rallies tonight. And one of the things that he said, which I think is really interesting, which was in response to the Transgender Day of Visibility that we saw on Sunday, which happened to coincide with Easter, was that he said, Election Day will be Christian Visibility Day. Listen to this.
And what the hell was Biden thinking when he declared Easter Sunday to be Trans Visibility Day? Such total disrespect to Christians, and November 5th is going to be called something else. You know, it's going to be called Christian Visibility Day, when Christians turn out in numbers that nobody has ever seen before. Let's call it Christian Visibility Day, all right?
Now, there were a number of headlines and chyrons, right? Those lower thirds on the liberal news networks that were indicating that Trump is infusing Christianity with his movement. And I read that and I thought to myself, this has got to be one of the dumbest things I've ever read, right? And it's like, come on. They've been calling us the Christian right since I was not even old enough to vote. If we've been called the Christian right for so long, why would they say Trump is infusing Christianity? Obviously, because they want to make it seem like he's an evil person and that somehow Christianity is bad and he is a Christian nationalist, just like that woman we had, 3 or 4 weeks ago that said that, there are Christian nationalists that believe that our rights come from God and not from the government. And she was shocked by this idea. And again, it's not because I'm a Christian nationalist and I agree with that ideology. No, it's because I am an American patriot. And I've read my Declaration of Independence. I've read my Constitution. I literally have one right next to me. It's framed. I actually got it from the old WABC studio where we used to produce the Mark Levin show. And I've had it for years. And I look at it all the time. I got every article, every amendment. It's all there. And I just can't help but think this is so silly to say that Trump is infusing Christianity in his message. I mean, don't most conservative Christians that are in the Republican Party that are, vying for the nomination, don't they all do that? Didn't Mike Pence infuse Christianity in his message for his gubernatorial campaign, for his congressional campaign? Haven't candidates been getting the endorsement of Pat Robertson and many others over the years, including Ronald Reagan when he ran? I mean, isn't this how politics has worked forever? Why say that Trump is infusing? Well, again, of course, they want to create controversy. They now know that they have a less informed population that knows only what they've been told in a couple of college campuses over the last 18 months. And it seems like their memory's no longer than that. They don't have a fundamental grasp on history or even on current events in some cases. So people start to buy this stuff. They're like, yeah, no, that's a Christian, it's Trump. The Trump Christians are radical evangelical Trumpists or whatever they want to call us. I mean, the whole thing is is fascinating to me. The way Christianity has been villainized in the United States, the war that we see on a particular religion, and we've seen it for a long time, right? But it just seems like they're doubling down on it because, well, Trump talked about it, and Trump said that Election Day will be Christian Visibility Day. Then obviously there's something wrong with that, right? And I think that's just it's sad, it's wrong, and it's embarrassing that anybody even believes it, right? I want to see if I could find this article that I saw where it said Trump is infusing. Yeah, New York Times. The Church of Trump, how he's infusing Christianity into his movement. I mean, come on. It doesn't get better than that. Look at this. It's published everywhere and republished everywhere. You've got it on Facebook, New York Times, all over the place. Yahoo News, you name it. It's everywhere. Let me just give you a couple of tidbits on this. This is by Michael Bender, Monday, April 1st. And it's not an April Fool's joke. It's got a picture of a guy that says, Jesus is my Lord, Trump is my president. And look, I've met Christians that take exception to intertwining electoral politics and one's faith. I get it. And I asked them why. Why do you see a problem with that? And they said, well, because we think, faith is a holy thing that's really about God. And while that may inform some of your political views, it shouldn't be the other way around, right? Your political views shouldn't inform your faith. And again, I don't necessarily believe all that. I mean, I do think that they can be separate. I think you can say, look, I love Jesus and my politics are totally separate. I just don't think that it's easy to reconcile that, right? It's a challenge, but many people do it. I mean, you have it all the time, right? You've got people that embrace things like liberation theology, which is really a Marxist concept within the church, that Jesus was a commie in many ways. And we've had discussions with Pastor Lucas Miles on that. He's written a couple of books on that topic. But this is how this New York Times article starts. Long known for his improvised and volatile stage performances, former President Donald Trump now tends to finish his rallies on a solemn note. Soft, reflective music fills the venue as hush falls over the crowd. Trump's tone turns reverent and somber, promoting some supporters to bow their heads or close their eyes. Prompting. Others raise open palms in the air and murmur as if they are in prayer. In this moment, Trump's audience is his congregation, and the former president is their pastor as he delivers a roughly 15-minute finale that evokes an evangelical altar call, the emotional, traditional response that concludes some Christian services in which attendees come forward to commit to their Savior. And they put Savior here with a lowercase s. The great silent majority is rising like never before under our leadership. He recites from a teleprompter in a typical version of the script. We will pray to God for our strength and for our liberty. We will pray to God and we will pray with God. We are one movement, one people, one family, and one glorious nation under God. The meditative ritual might appear incongruent with the raucous epicenter of the nation's conservative movement. Why? Why would it be? Why would conservatives or the conservative movement, A, why would it be raucous? and B, why is it incongruent? Anyway, but Trump's political creed stands as one of the starkest examples of his effort to transform the Republican Party into kind of a Church of Trump. His insistence on absolute devotion and fealty can be seen at every level of the party, from Congress to the RNC to rank-and-file voters. Trump's ability to turn his supporters' passion into piety is crucial to understanding how he remains the undisputed Republican leader, despite guiding his party to repeated political failures and while facing dozens of felony charges in 4 criminal cases. His success at portraying these prosecutions as persecutions and warning without merit that his followers could be targeted next has fueled enthusiasm for his candidacy and placed him once again in a position to capture the White House. I have to tell you, what's this guy's name here? Mark Bender. If you really believe this, you're really not paying attention. Maybe before you write a piece like this, you should go and interview a few people. Ask a few people who consider themselves to be Christians and consider themselves likely voters why this is happening. Because the note that he ends here, that there's fueled enthusiasm for his candidacy, and it's placing him once again in a position to capture the White House. It is the people, sir, Mr. Bednar, that are putting him in that position, right? It's the people. He has the will of the people. And if you want to go into the spiritual world, you know, you could maybe say it's an act of God. But to me, it's clearly the will of the people, right? It's we, the people, that rule this roost over here. I just don't see how he's magically conned everyone, right? This is such a condescending position to take that somehow Donald Trump has this magical ability to con all Americans. It's not a con. People believe what they want to believe. They're not being conned. They believe that Trump's policies are better than Biden's policies. They believe that an indicted Trump, a 2 times impeached Trump, is better than than Biden in this one term. I also agree with this. This has a zero to do with his faith. I've often said I'm voting for a president, not a pastor. I don't care. And people have criticized me saying, oh, that's the problem. You're too focused on the bottom line. You're darn right I am. That's the whole point. I've got children that have to live in this country. I want to continue to make money in this country. I don't want inflation at 35, 45%, even though they claim it's 3 or 4. Nobody wants this life. Do we even get back to a place where like used cars are affordable, or, you know, you could buy a car for $2 or $3 grand, you know, a little hoopty, instead of 6 or 7 or 8 grand like it is now? I mean, everything is just so ridiculous. Nobody wants that. So yeah, if you want to criticize some Trump supporters saying he's chosen by God, go right ahead. But then the debate becomes you're really not criticizing the Trump supporters or Trump. You're criticizing people that have faith in something they can't see. You're criticizing people who believe in a God because you don't believe in that God. That sounds like bigotry to me. I don't know. What say you? Give me a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
The Bible doesn't mention abortion or gay marriage, but it goes on and on about forgiving debt, liberating the poor, and healing the sick. Christian nationalists like to say this is a Christian nation. Not only is that historically inaccurate, not only is that theologically blasphemous, but it's also just not true. Look around us. If this was truly a
get into Trump v. Biden. I want to get to this pastor in a moment. But Trump says he wants to debate President Biden, and I think it might actually happen. Listen to this.
We have an empty podium right here to my right. You know what that is? That's for Joe Biden. I'm trying to get him to debate. I'm calling on Crooked Joe to debate anytime, any place. We'll do it anywhere you want, Joe.
That's President Trump at one of the rallies. Now, I think, this is my belief. Again, people say, oh, he won't. I totally believe that Joe Biden will debate Trump. And I do believe that Biden will lay a glove. And that's really all he's got to do, right? He just needs to 1 or 2 sound bites that he can have his staff in the media, you know, like Dana Bash and Joe Scarborough and the others that work for him. And they will just repeat that ad nauseum and be like, he cleaned this clock. Biden took out Trump. There's no way he can survive. The walls are closing in. You remember that stuff, right? So I don't know. I want to know what you think about all of this stuff. The Church of Trump. Will Trump debate Biden and all of that? Let's go to Chicago. The world famous WGN. Diane, go right ahead.
Oh, hi. In listening to all the talking, now I get other topics I want you to touch on, and there's not that much time.
Go right ahead.
I was calling about, well, first of all, I'd like to outright say I hope Trump chooses DeSantis, because the Trump-DeSantis ticket would be just a going forcefully or going all the way with the agenda. And I talk to a lot of people here in Chicago. I ride the L and all of that, and I'm always gabbing to people. And a lot of black people, the tradition of Christianity, by the way, among black people, Mahalia Jackson singing at the March on Washington, et cetera, et cetera. That's a lot of Christianity with Martin Luther King. And that's Protestant Christianity. I know you're a Catholic, but the sensibility
No, I'm also Protestant.
Founder.
I was raised Catholic, but I made the switcheroo when I was 18.
Oh, okay. Because a Protestant is doctrine or whatever is more about liberty of the mind or liberty, period. And the liberty is a gift from God, just like, not from government, like you said.
Yep.
But anyway, a lot of people that I talk to, black people, who, come up in that background.
In the black church.
Chicagoans, right. And pretty much their parents or grandparents, et cetera. And casual conversations. There's many, many, many times, so often, more so than since 20. But ever since, I have to say, the migrant thing has happened, Trump has a lot of followers. So if Trump stays the course with his agenda, and instead of going all over the map with all kinds of other comments or even, the name calling, if he just keeps on and gets that right candidate, I'll say I don't think he should pick a woman, because if he picks a woman, it's going to be the women's issues brought in. Remember, it gets then batted around.
Right. Every one of those arguments has the other side to the coin, right? So if he doesn't pick a woman, they're going to say, oh, there he is. He's a misogynist. He doesn't care about women, and he's already weak with suburban white women. So that's an area he needs to build on. So I think that's important. But another thing with DeSantis is the electorate didn't want DeSantis, right? He wasn't competitive at all. And this wasn't his time. I think there's also something to be said for saying that these are both residents of Florida, and it's just not going to happen, right? We're not going to have two candidates for president coming from the same state. I just don't see that actually happening. So I don't know. I think Trump will pull a surprise, and he's going to do his best to get a candidate that's going to bring him through, right? I think he was a lot less talkative about the topic of the Bible and God and Christianity in the first campaign because he had Mike Pence to do all of that for him. So he's got to balance out the ticket one way or another, and I think he's going to do a good job in picking it. He usually does a good job. Diane, thank you for your thoughts. I appreciate it, and thanks for tuning in. A big shout out to Chicago WGN. Folks, we're coming right back, and I'm going to play the rest of that clip with the pastor because the things he says are kind of interesting. Don't go anywhere.
Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. And before I play this clip from this pastor who says that America's not really a Christian nation, if we run out of time, I'm going to tease that and just say that I will definitely use it on the short version of the podcast, This is America with Rich Valdez. And make sure you're subscribed to that as well, for those of you that subscribe to podcasts. And if you don't, you should. They're a fantastic tool. I'm subscribed to a few myself, even though I love live radio. And most of the stuff I listen to is live radio. But every now and again, I want to listen to a podcast, so always subscribe away. And you can do that right at richvaldez.com. Now, I want to get to the phones. Let's go to Sarah. She's in Bedford, Indiana, WBIW. Sarah, go right ahead.
Hey, I think that pastor is the reason that the churches are losing their members. This guy wants to deny that we have a Christian heritage. just because there is no establishment of an official religion, this country bears many signs of a Christian foundation. And I mean, and even going before it became the United States. For example, if I remember correctly, the Puritans established compulsory education because they believed that people would be more susceptible to the devil if they could not read, if they were not literate and thus couldn't read a Bible, you know. And it just amazes me that the left wants to erase all traces of our Christian heritage. And also, the Bible has plenty to say about human relationships. And just because we don't agree with it, you know, maybe someone doesn't agree with everything the Bible says, doesn't mean that it's not addressed in the Bible. It scares me that this guy calls himself a pastor, but I've seen a lot of these so-called pastors who are like that. And I really think it's the reason that Christianity is falling, because it's lost its salt.
I think you're 100% right, Sarah. That's a huge issue. And it's this, I'm going to call it perverted ideology or twisted theology that creates these problems. And ultimately they're, again, people will say these are differences of opinion, and that's fine. You can call it whatever you want. But one of them leads to something that you build on, and the other one leads to something you criticize, right? And that's what he's doing. He's just criticizing. He's not building anything. He's tearing down. He's telling people, if America were really this, if really, where's the upside there? Where's the win? Where's the unity? Where's the joy? Where's the love? Right? None of these things are Christ-like, in my opinion. And I think that's the issue. Just like all these people that claim to be freedom fighters, but they're really terrorists, right? Because ultimately they're not fixing anything, right? Hamas, what are they fixing? They've been in power forever, and people are still complaining about food and water. Why don't they have food and water? You're going to blame that on the Israelis too? It's kind of like the Cubans. The Cubans are still today. I saw a man on the street interview recently where Cubans were. This was an interview about hip hop music, but the guy, in his explanation of the proliferation of Cuban music and the integration of it with hip hop music in Cuba, he says and we'd be doing even better if it weren't for the United States holding us down. I can't think of any way that the United States is holding Cuba down. Now, someone would say, yeah, what about the embargo? What about it? How is that holding a whole country down? That country is in shambles. Havana is literally crumbling. The architecture is crumbling because of a lack of trade with the United States. Is that how it works? Every other country that doesn't trade with the United States is going belly up? No. They're going belly up. They're starving. It's crumbling because of communism. That's precisely why it's failing, right? And people fail to understand these things. So when you blame people and there's a boogeyman for everything, this is always how it's going to end up, Sarah.
I agree. I completely agree. And by the way, Cuba had a lot of help from the Soviet Union, and yet they're still crumbling. They were just as poor back then when they had Soviet aid.
And after that, Venezuela. No, you're 100% right. It's a joke that these are straw man arguments that people make, and they just don't hold any water for me. Sarah, thank you for the call. Big shout out to Bedford, Indiana, WBIW. Let us continue. Let's go to Ken, Lansing, Michigan, WILS. Ken, go right ahead. You're on with Rich Valdez.
Hey, Rich, great evening listening to you as always. I was listening to your former boss earlier tonight, the great one.
The great one, Mark.
He was talking. Yes, the great one. Well, the Maharishi left us all, but he has two great disciples of truth, and I'm speaking to one, and Mark is the other.
Very kind.
But anyways, for Joe Biden and John Kirby and that other clown Sullivan to berate Israel for that accidental killing of them aid workers after, and this is Mark talking, bringing this up, after Joe Biden took the bait from the Taliban about, hey, this vehicle here has got a terrorist, you guys might want to put a drone in on him. And of course, Biden took the bait and killed a top aid worker and his 7 children. But he must have forgot about that when he's criticizing Netanyahu for the same thing that he did.
Right.
But, another thing Mark was talking about, Rich, was there are over 400 miles of tunnels under Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
So how in the hell did our intelligence satellites, he didn't say this, I'm just figuring this out myself as a dumb old carpenter, how in the hell did our satellites not pick up all these massive thousands and thousands of dump trucks of dirt, taking this dirt and moving it and putting it somewhere and not thinking what's going on? You know, what the heck is going on?
Yeah, but, I don't have an answer to that one, so I guess that makes me, a dumb broadcaster. But I think that the reality is these guys have been very active with this tunnel system for a very long time, and it just fascinates me how there's still this massive critique. They want to blame Israel for absolutely everything. And what I mean by that is, the fact that there's problems with getting relief aid into Gaza. This is not because the IDF people are killing relief workers or preventing anything from happening. Why is there no criticism of the Arab neighbors not allowing them in, of Egypt saying no thank you, of Jordan saying absolutely not, we will not open our borders to Palestinian refugees? Why? Why not? Your Arab brothers and sisters. Could it be because they realize that this is, in many ways, a problem of their own making? Could it be that in many ways they realize this is not my fight, this is a fight that you've made? You went and found this fight for 15 years. Not 15, it's 18 years, going on 19 years that the Taliban has, Hamas has been in charge of Gaza. And here we are, same exact outcome. No food, no infrastructure, no electricity, no jobs. Yet everything is Netanyahu's fault. Netanyahu is absolute Satan in their opinion. Why? Because they're all sorry. You can't do that. I'm sorry. It just doesn't work. In my book, there is no level of oppression that severe that is keeping them from succeeding in every single way. And the big one for me is that I've spoken with people who live there, and they've told me our biggest enemy here is the Palestinian Authority. It is them that create these problems with the Israelis, that they want peace with the Israelis so that they could freely move in and out of Israel so that they could work there. This is the key problem. People that actually support Hamas, and then I'm sure there are plenty that are also afraid. And there's going to be a percentage of those that are afraid. But I believe, look, if you're really oppressed, and I don't think I've ever been oppressed, so I can't really relate. But if you're genuinely oppressed, I think you're going to do your best to get away, right? We see people that feel oppressed in other countries, and they make their way right to the open border in our country, and they walk right in, and they get themselves a little debit card, prepaid debit card, a hotel stay at the New Yorker Hotel, and so much more. So if all of that is actually happening, you tell me how they're not able to get out. Well, again, they're not getting out because their neighbors won't even accept them. That isn't on the United States. That isn't on Israel. That's on them. Anyway, Ken in Lansing, Michigan, I really thank you for the call. I really do appreciate it. Big shout out to everybody listening on WILS. I'm going to take a quick pause right here, coming back to the rest of your calls. Idaho, South Carolina, Florida, Montana. Don't go anywhere. Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Best head of hair in live late night radio 6 years in a row. It's Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Is the view of this administration that the inflow of immigrants do more to strengthen the United States or hurt the United States? Does it do more?
So, Josh, I appreciate the question, and I think it's an important question as we're hearing clearly awful rhetoric from the other side. But what we know, what this president believes, and you've heard this president say this before, is that we know immigrants strengthen our country. and our economy as well. It goes hand in hand here.
So there you have KJP. It is not a detriment. It is an asset, right? This is something that strengthens America to have the influx of illegal immigrants at the border. This is good for America. These people are out of their minds, and they think that you and me are unable to hear, unable to see, and unable to think. Ridiculous. No, illegal immigration is bad for America. I think everybody knows it, and we're seeing it every day. And some people are paying the price with their lives. Let's go to your calls. Where do we go? Let's see who's next in line. Let us go to Kevin, Englewood, Florida, WENG. Kev, go right ahead.
Hey, Rich, just want to get your thoughts on how to prevent the unfortunate deaths that we saw in Israel. Should the Biden administration and Congress increase aid to end the war sooner? Should Israel change their operational tempo? Should aid workers even be there? Thanks.
Yeah, great question. I think the end part of it is really where we're at, right? I think the aid workers probably should steer clear. These guys are coming in hot and they're coming in heavy. No, I'm not a general. I'm no expert on these things, but I can tell you this thing will be over a lot sooner if we're able to allow these people to do what they've got to do. And I believe the job is to eradicate Hamas, quite simply. And I would add to that, this is kind of what we went through in Afghanistan, right? There were caves everywhere, caves, and our missiles I think we had one missile that could get into the caves. The rest of them weren't good enough to find their way into the caves. This was a huge problem, and we were there forever and a day. I think we're seeing something very similar with these underground tunnels in Gaza. And that's the key, right, is to flood them, to cement them, to end them. Now, of course, the question, what about the hostages? Yeah, that's a very valid consideration. And that's why it has to be kind of like a surgical strike as opposed to, hitting them with a meat grinder. However, I say all of this to say the death is going to be inevitable, right? So if the Israelis are there, and I've seen this with my own eyes, and they're there saying, look, you've got to come to this place in Rafah or this place in wherever we are where you can get out of here and we will get you out and, you're not in the danger zone. People got to get there. But if we continue to see what we've seen over the years where, civilians or people dressed as civilians are actually engaging in warfare, even including sometimes small children, 12-year-olds that are packing heat or part of the distraction to come at the IDF soldiers. What are you going to do when your enemy is 12? And we've seen this again in the Middle East. Repeated times we've seen it. We've seen these children in some cases be bred to hate the Jews, to hurt them. And it's not the only situation that we've seen like that. And again, I'm not trying to absolve the IDF of any responsibility that's theirs. We have to be careful. We want to always try to eliminate killing innocent people. Absolutely. Right? And something one of our callers just mentioned, this is exactly what Biden did in the retaliatory strike for Abbey Gate, right? Where I think it was an aid worker and his family that were killed in this retaliatory strike. It was not the bad guys. These things lamentably do happen. They should never happen. But it is real life, and it is war, and it's a conflict, and it's ugly, and it's horrible. And it's, I can't sit here and justify anything. I'm not saying that's good that it happens. I'm just saying that it does. It's kind of like when you hear, this woman, Laken Riley, she was raped and murdered. That should never happen. Or she was murdered, I should say, by this man. It should never happen. But it did. So how do you deal with things that happen that should never happen? Right? I think swiftly, with the right level of force, to make sure it never happens again. And that's, in my opinion, what we have to do. I think that the United States needs to maintain their commitment to supporting Israel financially as a partner and get this thing resolved rather than turning their backs on them and having half of our government call for a new leader. I think that's unacceptable in the middle of this conflict. But again, this is the prerogative of the Biden administration. This is what they've chosen to do. He did similar with Saudi Arabia when he called them a pariah state, and then had to go there hat in hand begging for some gas. So I think Biden's not the guy, and because of him, we've seen so many of our enemies become emboldened, in particular Iran, who's bankrolling Hezbollah and Hamas and so many others. So I agree with you. We got to get the aid workers out of there. There's a lot of them that are in the middle of the conflict, and I've seen their videos as well. And they're like, we're here, we're doing the Lord's work, and amen, God bless them. But at some point, you got to get out, right? Journalists, you got to get out. These people are there, and they're there to destroy. And that's just the reality. They're not there to keep it nice and tidy. These people had infants in Israel that had their throats slit. That type of behavior just can't be tolerated, in my opinion. Thanks for the call. I appreciate it. Folks, we come back. Your calls, South Carolina, Montana, Idaho. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, let's go to Burlington, Vermont, WVMT, and check in with Deborah. Deborah, go right ahead. You're on with Rich Valdez.
Hi, Rich. Thanks for taking my call. I wanted to quickly mention, because I know we're short on time, that part of the $1.2 trillion budget signed by Biden last weekend, $380 million for, quote, enhanced border security projects in Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, Oman, and Tunisia, about $150 million of which must go to border security in Jordan. How about that?
Yeah, and that's likely because the Jordanians are saying, hey, look, the Palestinians are sneaking in, and you better do something about it. Right? Because this is just out of control. I believe it. I've seen the memes all over social media of pictures of Biden at a table filled with money saying, Biden, when it comes to border security in other countries, and then a picture of Biden with a table with no money on it, where it says Biden when it comes to dealing with border security in the United States. And you bring up an excellent point. Our focus is in the wrong place. His allegiance is to other countries, not to the United States. This is dead wrong. This is why Biden can't be reelected. Deborah, Burlington, Vermont, WVMT, thank you very much. Let us continue. Scott, Charleston, South Carolina, WTMA, very quickly. Go right ahead.
Rich, I was incensed by Admiral Kirby demanding someone be held accountable for this loss of life of 7 people. And as you mentioned, I'd like to know who was held responsible for the decision to evacuate out of Kabul instead of Bagram. And as you mentioned, 3 days later, a Hellfire missile drone strike killed 10 people, 7 of them were children. This guy, the driver of the car, was employed by a nonprofit California-based Nutrition and Education International. Now, if that's not a similar, orange comparison, I don't know what is.
Yeah, listen, Scott, right on the money. Big shout out to South Carolina, WTMA. Thank you, Scott, for your call. Paul in Boise, Frank in Evergreen. I'm sorry, guys. The music means they're kicking me out of here. But I'll be back tomorrow. Hasta la próxima. Until the next time, take care, good night, and God bless. I am Rich Valdez. Thank you.